I bid you welcome, as I put before you a new topic for your consideration. That being the subject of hope and faith, and how they fit into the human paradigm. What meaning do they have in your life? What use, practical or otherwise? Where is the dogmatic faith fit in? Where is the religion fervor, the doctrine of faith, and what is the significance of this? How does hope work? Is it a mechanism, an instrument? How can one use it to one's advantage, if at all? For there are those who would say it is but an artificial means, something interjected into time, of little and no significance, a bit of foolery, and for those that are more, a plumb connected to the earth, well, why bother to believe in hope, for is it not just another belief? So here we have concepts, ideas, subjects worth exploring, and as usual, from a variety of perspectives. We will begin by examining the subject to the best of the abilities. Then we will progress into the questions that have submitted, as these have been grouped into the most useful and practical lines as well. Let us begin then. Hope and faith, are they one or two? Separable or inseparable, two sides of the same coin, or different altogether? How did they evolve, from where and from whom? We begin with hope then, perhaps answering the question that yes, they are inseparable, and yet they are distinct, one to the other as well. Hope, then, is an appeal to the within. Faith is an appeal to something without, something larger, something greater. Hope, then, is an appeal to something, hopes for an eventuality, something to come about. Hope, then, looks forward to something with a desire. Hope at times has, well, at least a reasonable confidence that a desire may come about. Hope anticipates a moment in the future. Hope has in some ways an expectation, something that one hopes to obtain, although that is not necessarily the case. And so hope is a concept, but it is a concept that is infused with a certain belief in oneself. Hope is beliefs in one's own ability to manifest, to bring about, to conceive of an idea, to uphold that idea, to bring it forward. Hope has at its core a belief that as something has come about before, it may come about again. If we stay with that premise, with that concept for a moment, where can you imagine might be the very first time in which hope came about? What is it that the human mind could have hoped for? What is the very first hope that you can imagine a human being to have? If prior to that moment hope did not exist, and after that moment hope did exist, what was the very first hope, the very first thought? Can you imagine? Well, here we travel back in time then, back to the very beginning of humanity, back to where the mind was not as well developed as it is now. Today the mind is a bit askew. Today the mind is not certain who or what it belongs to, but we can say that it is fairly well developed along the lines of this age. What the mind is capable of doing or creating or conceiving, that is well developed, for the age is near conclusion now. So this human mind is almost as well developed as can be expected for this age. But if we were to travel back in time, if you like, not necessarily archaeological time nor linear time, simply back in time, to when the concept of a human being was a simpler concept. Yes, a simpler being in a simpler time. And here you will follow Gaia into venturing into other realms, where we will say that before human soul spirit entered the realm of the human, there was simply the human being. Just the being with a very simple mind. A curious mind, but a simple mind. A more innocent mind. In some ways more creative than today's mind, but rather simple, pure. Everything that the human mind then conceived of almost instantly manifested. Yet, before you long for that time, I will tell you that the thoughts of humanity at that time were rather simple, simplistic also. So the human being of that time did not long for a greater life or a greater lifestyle. It did not long for the abundance that you may long for today, for the longevity or the relationship or any of your longings of today. The human being of which we now speak was a very simple being, and so a simple-minded being. So what it hoped for were also very simple aspects, simple thoughts, simple things. When one longs for the simple, it is not difficult to find it most of the time. And so hope began in that way. Something just as simple as to say, I hope I will find dinner for this eve. And so it was found. So you see, the concept that one hopes and one obtains was rather simple then. It was not complex or complicated as what you might imagine now, where many, many ideas must come orchestrated together in order for your particular hope to come about, perhaps. And so in the simple mind of that human being, at that simpler time upon the earth as well, hope was born as a simple concept, a concept that easily could come about. There was no dogmatic approach, and to believe in hope was no different to believe in most other things that one could count upon quite easily. Hope then became a simple function of obtaining, of bringing forward, of finding and acknowledging once that was found. And so as hope continued then, it became that which linked one thought to another, a little glue, if you like, between one thought and the next, between a thought of being hungry and a thought of obtaining something to eat. The little glue or the little bridge was hope. What a simple concept. A little bridge from here to there. There was no great chasm to cross. There was no thought to whether one needed to believe in hope or whether it existed or made a difference or not. It simply was part of the process. That still does not explain how hope came to be. So now we must travel a little bit further even, and I must ask even for you to stretch your indulgence a little bit more, to include the concept, at least for this speaking, that human being, that humankind, is a created being. Yes, a manufactured being, with a mind that was formed out of ideas that would serve that simple time and that simple being. Imagine for a moment that you go and travel to a beautiful, distant, and exotic place, but you believe that you will only be there for a short time. Perhaps you would not go to all the bother, then, of constructing the finest of homes upon the firmest of foundations. Perhaps a simple hut would do, at least for a short time. And so this human being of which we speak then was constructed of material for a simple being for a simple time, one that was not meant or indicated to be long-lasting, to have the longevity that humankind, of its own wisdom, I might add, has come about for its own sake and its own being, much to the credit of humanity of today. And so the simple being then, with the simple mind and the simple thoughts and the simple hut to live in, if you like, was fairly content, being and doing what it was. Its hope was fulfilled for the most part, and when its hope was not fulfilled, more than likely it was the next day, so that in essence the hope was still fulfilled. This being, then, upon the earth was given these characteristics by those master geneticists whom you may have heard of in other studies, and perhaps here we will also, at a future time, speak then even of how this human being came to be, perhaps in another topic. But for this one we must take that assumption so that we will progress. The created human being, then, in its simple purpose, had very few hopes, and the hopes were simply the bridge from here to there. The difference being that the human being was, in fact, a quick learner, not always able to make or change its mind. You see, in that time it could not change its mind, nor make a new idea. It could follow an idea, understand a concept if it was simple and could easily be explained. But new thoughts, created thoughts, original thoughts were not part of that being. And so hope, again, a simple bridge from here to there. Now again, humanity progresses quickly, moving through time as it would be, and somehow, almost magically, without the assistance of those that created or made or brought to be the human being, began of its own to make certain connections, small leaps and bounds from here to there, not necessarily original, but creative in their own way, and a movement from here to there that was rather astounding, at least for the short-lived time in which it came to be. This was learned by one and by all rather quickly, so that the creator beings, the master geneticists, if you like, took note of this, and of course a variety of thoughts regarding that came about. Eventually, there was less need for the geneticist to work with humanity, for much of the work was already ongoing, part of the process of procreation itself, part of the developmental process, just as after a time a small babe becomes a toddler, and the toddler begins in its own way to teach itself how to be or how to do without as much guardianship or guidance. The preference is to learn of its own accord. Well, so the human mind as well wished to grow of its own accord. The way to duplicate cells then also duplicated or thoughts, or mutated thoughts, better put. Mutated the being, and the human being quickly, faster than you might imagine, every generation doubled its ability to conceive and to grow and to become almost a different species, a different version of humanity altogether. So quick was the growth, so that the bridge, the small bridge from here to there, or from one concept to another then, also changed and exchanged itself, and the old ways no longer suited. Now, an interesting phenomena came about, is that one day, or during one generation, better put, those who had created and given purpose to humanity then made a way and a place for themselves to exist elsewhere, to exist off the planet. They did not leave altogether, they simply moved away and off the planet for a variety of reasons, some of these being that there were impending earth changes, others to do with reasons of comfort, others to do with reasons of allowing humanity as well to develop or not according to their own guidance. The effect that this had upon that version of humanity was one of awe, of inspiration, of also being detached or losing something, losing its lineage, losing its parentage, losing its heredity. And so it saw its cosmic parents move into the heavens, move off the earth, and to its own imaginings, to the simple mind, it appeared that everything of great importance, teaching and teachers and parents and love or acceptance or direction had moved then off the earth onto another plane. These beings then did not understand the concept of near or far. They did not understand how one could be here and there also, or how easily one could go and return from, even if the distances were very large. And so humanity of that time felt abandoned. It felt left behind. It saw everything leave, and so it began in its simple imaginings to see that everything that it considered of value now resided somewhere else, not here, not upon the earth, not with 2 feet and hands upon the earth, but elsewhere, somewhere up in the sky, up in the heavens, toward the sun, toward the stars. And from here and there they would see the beings, what you would term today extraterrestrials, come and go from a place beyond or above, from the above place, as they conceived of it, or what was later called heaven, or the heavenly place, the heavens above. Humanity then quickly was growing, as we have said before, in mind and body and strength and knowledge, so quickly that one generation prior to the last could almost forget where it had come from and what it had learned, for everything was doubling. Well, if it learned and remembered much, it also forgot just as much. It left behind all of the old knowledge because it no longer served it. It no longer belonged to the present moment. Once that became the case, then the next or the newer generations did not necessarily even remember the parents that the last generation did, for everything had already changed so very drastically. And so when the same parents returned from the above place or from the heavens, it seemed to them to be a new phenomena, new teachers, new beings, something altogether new and different, for they did not have the memories. The memories did not continue then from one generation to the next, just as today your memories from one lifetime to the next do not transfer well or easily. In that time, even from one generation to the next, they also did not transfer, you see? As the beings then returned, each time effecting more changes upon the earth, or simply studying or noting the changes, humanity needed to create new bridges of understanding, old and new, or a new language for understanding where one generation had come from and where the next was going. For it began to be that even one generation did not even recognize the last one as its own kind, thinking that it was something or someone altogether different. And so hope began in that time as a bridge, as a concept between generations. To hope to see another again, in essence, was to hope to remember, to hope not to forget where one came from and where one was going. Hope became then a glue or a bridge between generations, between thoughts, between ideas, not the same as how it is used today, where one hopes for the arrival of something that they have wanted for a very long time. The beings of long ago, the simple-minded human beings of which we speak, simply longed, hoped to remember what and who they were, long enough to recognize their own family members, long enough to recognize those who came as visitors and not to think of them as new each time that they arrived. So here you have, in essence, the very first, the origins of hope, and just how far back in the march of time they can be found, you see? And so hope then became the reasonable idea that one generation could see or expect to see or find the same result as the previous one. Not something unique or different. They simply hoped to live in the same world. This then was a product of the mind of that time. The mind literally created hope out of nothing. Hope was a language. Hope was the glue that would bind one generation or one being one to the other in a humanity that was quickly changing and growing and even becoming one species and then another. For what I refer to as a human being now was very, very, very different then, and perhaps you would not be as gracious nor as graceful in naming these a human being. Hope then, born in that time, continued to exist with humanity. It continued to exist and to be used in some ways as a tool. It was associated with the memory complex now. Today it is held separate from this. Today humanity is not sure exactly where to put hope nor faith, what category it fits into. Does it belong to the longing of the heart, or the mind's ability to conceive and to intend and to bring forth? Does it belong to the societal mind or the religious mind, or in what complexity does one accept or reject the concept as well? Hope, then, became something that the mind itself conceived of. It was not given to humanity to hope to be or to see or to do something. Imagine that. Humanity created, one of its first creatorships was to create hope. Hope for itself. It did not truly understand the concept of hope, but hope existed, and humanity used it in one way or another. It became part, then, again, of circumstance, of memory. It was applied. One applied hope in the one way that one applies memory, to remember how to do something, or remember from long ago and far away how something came to be. Hope was part of that concept, part of that complexity. At that time, humanity did not yet have fear or despair. That came later. It did, however, begin to have uncertainty. There was certainty and there was uncertainty. Hope, then, if you like, was the glue or the bridge between certainty and uncertainty, again associated with the memory. Hope is not, was not, therapeutic or a systematic process. It did not truly have to do with the likeliness or unlikelihood that something could or would come about. It was not related to an outcome or how real versus fantasy an outcome may be, simply associated with the mind, with the memory's ability to know and to recognize and to bring forward and to move from here to there with relative certainty. Hope was employed. This is the beginning of the concept then. Later it became a dynamic concept, meaning that it could be shifted from one idea to another or used by different parts of brain or mind for a different purpose, just as today you may hope for an experience or you may hope for a thing, an object, a creativity, or an outcome. So now we have explored, if you like, the very birth of hope, where it has come from, how it came about, and how humanity itself used it, and even today uses it, changes it, interchanges it. Today there is a great movement afoot to reject, in fact, the idea of hope or faith, to replace it, if you like, with intent and intention, and with other aspects that are more reasonable or well studied or better approved of. In the time of today, hope and faith has been more relegated to the concepts of religion. It is the religious mind, if you like, that hopes or has faith in this God or that truth. And of course those that have less faith, or so-called less, are critiqued, put into a category of their own, considered non-believers or less believers. So you see the entire concepts are also now being shifted out of focus again, pushed out of the way in favor of other more popular concepts. And yet you will find that these will not die out easily, particularly when there are dire moments or dire circumstances. The mind, the original mind that still dwells deep within, that mind can still be accessed, and that mind will still make a bridge from here to there, particularly when there are great generational shifts and changes as there are now. So now humanity is perhaps entering a time when there will be more hope and faith rather than less. Of course, those that are given to a scientific nature, they will continue to demand proof of what good does hope and faith. But you see, even while they are demanding proof and negating its presence, deep within them, their own mind, the scientific mind, hopes to find an answer that hope and faith does exist. So much is this at the core of the human being and the human mind, that even those that will not admit this easily, they will hold it within themselves as well. Hope, then, exists, and one hopes for a favorable outcome now. One understands now polarity and the movement from here to there. One hopes for something or someone. One hopes or expects or trusts that something will come about. One hopes to triumph over a difficulty or a challenge. One hopes to excel in a certain area of life. One hopes to bring forward some aspect of them, to strengthen it, to call it forward. And so hope exists now, even in a changing field. Hope is part of humanity's existence, because you see, the human being is a rather temporary being, meaning that it must have a purpose in order to think or to be or to do. The human being without a purpose is lost at sea, cast adrift in a sea of stars, or in a great ocean where it can see no landfall. Hope, then, exists so that the human mind makes a purpose. As long as the human mind has hope, among other important aspects, the human being will continue to exist. But here I tell you that if the human being loses some of its precious commodities, including hope, it can in fact be cast adrift in the stars or at sea. It would not find as much purpose. It would not find the continuity from here to there, from one life to another. It would not find a way to complete a purpose or an understanding or an undertaking. So hope exists still to bring all this together under a certain truth. How does the truth continue to exist? Because one trusts that the evolution of the human being will continue. And when one does not see trust at work because it is invisible, one hopes that it will continue to be. So hope now belongs to the continuity of life. The mind has shifted it a bit, not simply to the memory complex, but to how the mind uses or manipulates hope into what it considers positive territory. The mind has moved then, shifted the concept of hope into another priority, into another place, and now uses it to work upon its continuity. For instance, the fluidity of life. One sleeps tonight and hopes to awaken in the morning. One hopes for a greater longevity for one's body. One longs for or hopes for a relationship with self or all that is, or in relationship with other aspects of one's life. Hope now belongs to that aspect of the mind, to the continuity, to the life stream, the ability still to shift from here to there, but not so much from one generation to another as long ago, but from one purpose, from one truth, from one understanding of one to the next. Now, if we study this a bit more, we could also think upon for a moment, what if you had the understanding, the unequivocal understanding of what would happen tomorrow? Would you still hope? Would you still have hope for someone or something or an outcome for tomorrow if you already saw and knew what would come about tomorrow? Would there still be hope? It is a question that is worth considering. So part of the reason that you still have hope as well is that you do not know your past well enough, that you cannot yet conceive of your future well enough, that you can only imagine your future, that you have little and nothing to substantiate everything that will happen tomorrow. You only have relative certainty about it, not complete certainty, and so hope rests and lives there. It lives in the places within you that do not have certainty, that do not understand every subject, that understand that there are mysteries and mysterious aspects of both your past and more than likely your future. Incongruous moments. Hope exists for these, that you will understand them, that you will grow from them, that one day you will have the full abilities to manifest within you. And so hope exists because all else about you is not yet clear or forthcoming. You cannot remember your past or your past lives. You hope that one day it will come into view. You hope for a certain outcome or future, but you do not yet know or see your future because you are not arranged to do so yet, though soon you could be able to. So the better answer is here. When and if you have your full faculties to see far into your distant past and with grandness into the horizon of your future, then you would not need to hope. However, being that humanity is fickle in its orientation as well, what it may see in its future, it may not completely grasp or understand. And what it may see in its past, it may not wish to claim. And so hope, then, still aligns with the aspect of the mind that either says it does not know, or that it wishes to change, or understand, or remake. Hope, then, is a tool of the mind. You may do with it what you wish. The mind will use it, shift it, and move it from place to place within all of its fields, within all of the centers of the mind. The brain uses hope for its own devices. Like it or not, prefer it or not, you will dismiss it and it will return. You will throw it away and it will return. You will say, "No, I am only of a scientific mind, left brain, thank you." And some part of you will still hope that something is different, because it is then a tool and a place that belongs to the mind itself, from its birth long, long ago, and until some future date where the mind remakes it into something else again, and it has other and distinct properties that it can use for itself. Hope, then, is yours, and you may keep it for yourself. Now then, we continue as well, understanding faith and how the concept of faith and hope work together. Faith, I tell you, comes as well from trust and hope. Again, they are two sides of a similar coin, certainly linked together. Faith has more to do with a belief, but a belief in that which does not have a structure. So faith has more to do with a belief or an understanding of the unknown or the unseen, or as we have said in the beginning of this aspect, how to be, how to see into future moments, to something that has an outer authority. The parts of you that you do not understand are in faith that something else, someone else, greater than you or greater than the moment itself, will offer themselves. You have faith that you will come into view of this, that you will come into an understanding. This concept, then, of faith in something or someone else was born at a very similar time as the one that we have described early, when it came that the master beings, the master geneticists, took themselves to the skies, to the heavens, in great vehicles and places and cities into the heavens. The human beings, the simple human beings, did not know in all ways how or what to do for themselves, for, as far as they were concerned, they had lost their parents. They did not know how to do or how to think completely for themselves. Remember here that we are not speaking of your great mind or your great soul that has had oh so many lifetimes and learned oh so much. Here we are not thinking of the great being that understands this age and the concepts of this age and how to multiply its consciousness by twos and by fours. We are speaking of the beginnings of the origins of a very simple, childlike, innocent human being that sees the only parent that it knows take itself away in concepts and ideas, in places, and yes, in vehicles and ships that it cannot conceive of, for the simple mind cannot make that concept. Again, then, the mind creates a tool based upon its own need. The mind then creates faith. The mind creates faith in something, in a context that it does not understand, in an emptiness. The mind creates out of its own void something called faith, a place to place fear, if you like, a place to understand it, to hold it, a vessel, in order to soothe the innocent mind, just as a child has its own fear. Then the mind creates faith for the child, almost in the same way that one would fashion a doll to give to a child and say, here, place your fears in this rather than in your own self. The mind created something called faith and gave it then to the young human being and said, here, place your uncertainties or your doubts or your fears here. So the mind created faith in order to have something to do with fear. When fear was born, faith was born too, as an antidote to fear or uncertainty. Now, when you conceive of a fear today, already the mind may say to you, well, that is an unfathomed fear. Certainly this or that would not, could not come about. It's just a fear. Or it will conceive of every possible outcome to that fear and consider it one by one. But the innocent and simple mind that we are speaking of now could not conceive of all the fears, only it knew fear, not what it would, or what it would come about, or what it would be, simply the concept, the idea of fear. It was afraid. And so the mind, the parent mind, if you like, created faith in something outside of itself in order to assuage the fears of the innocent human being. And so humanity, even then, so long and longer ago, so much longer before it began to think of who its parents could be or were, or what universal teachers of spirit or religion or universal light would come and go from the earth, long before the first coming or the second coming or the third coming of the Master or the universal teachers, the simple human being, the human mind, created the concept in faith of something that would come and go and that would come again, and that when that something would return, it would have answers or miracles or something great or a gift or an understanding. And so hope and faith came together in that time. Hope in something that it could remember about itself. Faith in something that it could remember and call upon of something else or outside of itself or greater than itself. So to return to our original definitions, hope to do with something with oneself, the ability of oneself to manifest, to bring something about, to understand, to remember, to bring forward. Hope and trust in the self and in the life stream associated with the lifetime. Faith, then, grander than that. Faith is that hope related to something greater than oneself, to a greater power, a greater truth, a greater teacher, a master, something of the heavens or from beyond this reality. So here you have two interchangeable but subtly nuanced teachings or thoughts, both created by the mind at similar times, not exact but similar, for similar not exact purposes, and now you have a bit of history by which to understand the concept itself. Faith then is a trust and a hope, something of a reliable structure, a concept in another entity, something that is not based upon any proof, but something that has at its core a desire for goodness. And what is goodness? The origin of this comes from the parent. It is the parent that brings good. It is the parent that brings good, or godness, or the return of God, if you like. And here you have faith in good, or God, or teachers, or masters, or parents, from the very, very, very beginning. So before there was an organization to the religion structure as you understand it today, there was already faith in something outside of itself, which in some ways could be considered faith in a God or a God-like structure, faith in how things will be in the beginning and in the end. It is hoped that you are in appreciation of these conceptual structures, so that perhaps you will use them, cause them to grow within you, for indeed you could do so, understanding these concepts as well. Hope and faith then both have a transcendent reality, meaning that they are used in a certain way in this time and this age within a certain scope, but that they will transcend this time and this age, just as what we have related to you in this moment transcended so long ago and is still used differently now. The more that humanity is able to manifest for itself what it desires, or its conceptual realities, or to shift these or move these of its own accord, the more that hope and faith will be relegated to a new area where brain, mind could then use them for other properties as well. So if you would imagine, for instance, that once you manifest, once you manage or conceive of how to manifest for yourself, or have these grand understandings of how to intend and to bring forward, that you will have no use for hope and faith, again I tell you, that is incorrect. You will return them, if you like, to the library of the mind, by which the mind will gladly take them, reshape them, give them a new concept, invest in them another way to be used, and they will come back in the next generation in yet a different way, in a more purposeful way, or a more modern way, you may say. And so the idea of hope and faith as you understand it now will be relegated to the past, and then as all things do, they will come about again, retooled and repurposed. For I tell you then that faith will become part of something that could be called reasoned ideas and seasoned thoughts. You see, in this way it will be retooled. And even as you live a fuller life or a better life that is contrasted against the need for simple hope and faith, you will see that again it will remake itself, and even to the world of reasonable ideas, even to those minds that are most seasoned of thoughts, hope and faith still exist, and even those that admit to it little still secretly hold it. For I give you this promise. Hope and faith, then, cannot be settled or changed by a certain evidence, or I tell you that it would require so much proven and provable evidence to the contrary for hope and faith to change how it is significant. It belongs now to the moment. It belongs and rests somewhere between trust and belief, somewhere between the observable and the unobservable, or the visible or invisible, beyond the range of normal experience and beyond that, the paranormal, if you like, it exists there as well, and for almost every living human being. The concept or the question may come whether animal kingdoms or others also have hope and faith, and here I tell you, no, for they are made of a different structure, something likened to that, but not in that way. And now we progress into the questions that have been submitted relative to this topic, hoping that the topic is yet of interest to you and that the questions and answers will be useful to you in their own way. And perhaps some of these have already been answered in their own measure, in their own way, based upon the subject itself, yet we will address many just the same. The question being then, how does one know when you have done enough? When it is time to simply let go and allow all things to happen, to surrender, to trust, to allow, and to receive? How does one know when to stop hoping? Well, the answer to that is that it is individually aligned with one's own being. As long as there is a desire for a certain outcome or a certain thing or a feeling associated with that, as long as that lives somewhere within the being, although enough could have been done, the thought, the concept will still exist. In other words, as long as the longing, the wanting, the desirable thing or thought still lives somewhere within you, there is still more or different possibilities, a different way to view or to hold it. Does this mean that as long as you have hope and faith in that thing that still exists, that there is a chance that it will come about, even if it were something that would be quite impossible? No, not necessarily. However, hope and faith, then, being the bridges that we have said earlier, will still be useful tools for the mind to take a desire elsewhere, to make of it a different thing, to give it a different possibility, to place it in a different light, to move it into a different place or time within one's being. And so hope and faith still remain a tool, not so that it becomes so insistent that one can have it one way and only that way or nothing, for that is a human thought as well. But hope and faith work hand in hand to restore, to bring about balance, to create a bridge from here to there. But here to there is what changes. Hope and faith remain the constant, the bridge. But the two shorelines of where one has come from or is moving toward, that can change. And so one can let go of where one has come from and where one is moving toward, and let the bridge, let hope and faith continue to do what it does best, which is to take one to the next step or the next truth or the next place within oneself. Following that same line, the question being, how does intention and action work together with hope and faith? For as the questioner puts it, they have always seen hope as a rather weak stance that isn't very creative. Well, in fact, and hope and faith is not a creative aspect of the mind. It is the bridge from here to there. Intention, then, is an architecture. One intends to be or to have and to do and acts upon that intention. If you like, then, hope and faith strengthen that architecture. Hope and faith do not have the same physical structure as intention has. Intention is more physically aligned with the human mind. Hope and faith are aligned with a parallel aspect of that, a mindless mind, or something that is the eternal mind, or the original mind. And intention has more to do with the presence, as hope and faith is associated with that present aspect, then it comes about in its own way, making and remaking itself. Whether hope is considered weak has to do with the questioner himself. Hope is not made to strengthen or weaken a structure necessarily, but to enhance. Hope enhances a moment. Hope brings about a steadier hand, a steadier next step. Of course, it is likely that you may study what has been brought forward, that hope and faith, even be they considered the placebos of man, that they are quite effective. They are quite effective, and those that in fact have hope and faith are known to live longer, are known to collaborate better one with another, are known to find solutions, whether they be perfect or imperfect, just a little sooner than those without this solution-oriented aspect. So hope and faith attach themselves to intention. That is how it works best. It does not replace intention. It is not a substitute, nor is intention strong enough on its own to bring about something, so that hope and faith work together. They are allies. They are not creative in the process, but I tell you that they are very fine companions, at least as the mind thinks so, for in all this time, in all these eons of time, the mind has not dismissed these, and has yet found a use for them. Therefore perhaps you will as well. In order to understand as well the subject of hope and faith, one must think of the energetic state of the body. What kind of energy does the body bring about or hold or exude when one is in a hopeful state of mind? The question then being, energetically, what does the body appear to be? The energetic state of the body, what does it look like? What kind of energy is attracted to and repelled from a person in a state of hope? Well, I will tell you here that it is a subtlety, and again there is a range of hope, and whether hope and faith exist both together, or whether one is more consciously applied than the other. Hope cannot easily be seen by some, and yet when there is an energy of hope in effect, others consciously and unconsciously are magnetically attracted to that by a universal mind, by the mind of the human that is and has always been, by the species mind. There is in fact no being that is repelled by hope. Hope is magnetic, it is an attraction. It is not repelling for others to be in a state of hope. And even those that would say, I no longer believe in hope, I did that long ago and it did not work, even the energy of the being that surrounds that one, they would attract the other energy of the other person. In other words, if you were the one saying, I no longer believe in hope, some small part of you would still say, but I wish I did, but I remember when I did. You see? And so even the most cynical being is still attracted to hope in some way. Even those who have been let down or set aside by the measures of life, even they are still attracted and enhanced by hope. The further question then being, is it possible for faith in something or someone to limit you? Is it possible that it will hold or prevent something within you from expanding into another possibility? Here I tell you, it is possible. It is possible that if you place your faith in something or someone that is less than meritorious, it is possible that you will experience limit and lack instead of an enhanced experience. Faith, then, is a very personal application of a concept in something that is grander than you are, as we have said earlier. But if you will apply a great or grand concept to something that is lesser in frequency, well, it may not be able to enhance or to bring about what the faith would choose or hope to do. Imagine, for instance, that you have great faith in a companion to move through certain addictive behaviors, but this companion does not think of himself or herself in such grand ways. In fact, this companion doubts of their own ability. They have little hope or faith in themselves or in anything outside of them or in any circumstance in which they may prevail. In that case, you would be investing or intending or having faith in something that is much less. So what would the faith or the hope attach itself to? What would it link to? Where would be the greater concept? Remembering that hope and faith are bridges. There must be a bridge to somewhere or something. And here we are speaking of the unlikely event in which an individual is well lost at a sea within themselves, cast adrift within their own mind. So it would be difficult to place a great deal of faith in the grander thing when the grander thing cannot be seen or imagined. In that way, hope still exists, but it is not easily linked to faith. So the way to use hope and faith to its best degree is to align it first with the self that is growing and evolving, rather than the self that is held only within the structure of beliefs, which is a weaker structure. So it is first to align hope with the grandest self-structure, self-motivation, self-evolving essence, and then to place the faith in something that is grander than that. And here need not be the concept of God or godliness. It can be the concept of the intention itself, or the concept of the manifesting principle, the concept of an abundant life or coming forth. It is simply a structure of something that is then greater, a greater architecture of life, a higher frequency in this case. The further question being then, do, or at what point does, faith and hope become knowing itself? No, faith and hope can align themselves with truth, or the discovery of truth, or with understanding of truth, or the evolution of truth, but it is not the same as knowing. Knowing comes from understanding. Understanding comes from delving into the structure of the thing or the thought, comes from the experiential. Faith and hope are not necessarily linked to the experience, though they can be. Again, a simple reminder that they are bridges that can attach or align with other thoughts, be they intentions or desires, be they have structure in the physical or the non-physical. Now then, the question being, if one truly believes that all that is required always arrives on time or when it is most needed, is there any necessity to add hope to that belief? No, there is not. However, a reminder that how the question has been framed implies a belief that one has all that one requires and that everything arrives on time. As long as that belief is suitable, as long as that belief continues to prove itself out, then there is no necessity of hope. However, there may come a day or a time when the belief begins to lose its integrity, as some beliefs do. They become old over time, you know. They become outmoded over time. Beliefs begin to wear themselves out or wear out their welcome. And so if you move beyond that belief, then before you move from that one to the next one, you may choose to invoke hope or faith. So hope and faith is not a necessity. You do not need them, and yet I remind you that the mind has yet found a use for them. There are many places within you that are not employed, and yet hope and faith appear to be even overworked these days. In terms of hope and faith, then, if one does not accept a condition or a situation that is difficult to surmount or release, does that require or have use for hope? In other words, it is to say, if hope in the universal concept of there is lack or there is good health, will that attract more of the lack, or will hope and faith improve that situation? Here I tell you that again, hope and faith work to the magnetic or to the positive. They are attractive frequencies. They are directed, attracted frequencies, and regardless of to what they are applied, they will work in a positive way. When they do not work in the positive way is when they become attached to a belief or to a structure, or that an outcome can only be this or that, this way or that, or this person or that, or this day or the other. Hope and faith are tools of the mind, bridges that fill in gaps. They are not promises of perceived outcomes. They are not to be used in folly in other ways, or to be dismissed. They are to be used frequently, without necessity. They belong to the realm of trust as well. Now, if one makes a request, for instance, a benevolent outcome request, and trusts that above all something will happen, and has faith that that something will happen, and adds hope that it will happen, and yet for one reason or another it does not happen, how does that change one's request or impact one's ability to make another request? Well then, a very fine question. A benevolent outcome is a desired outcome. It is an outcome that has a certain certainty attached to it. If one will make such a request, one must do so from a place of understanding how those energies are used and directed and move forward. In other words, if you will throw a boomerang, then you must know the exact moment, time and place, and where to stand in order to retrieve that boomerang, to place your hand out in that moment. If one will make this kind of request, a benevolent outcome request, in some ways is a way to say that there is an agenda, that there is approve or approving associated with it. And when one attaches to that a trust and a hope that it will happen in just that way, because one considers it to be so benevolent, one must also be in one's power in all of the moments associated with that request. One must be the requester, the receiver, the empowerer, the manifester, the one that knows. In other words, here is a request of the alchemist. Those who make such requests must indeed place themselves in the alchemy of the soul in order to have a very particular outcome. That is a learning process, and there are very few, I will tell you, that have mastered this concept. It is well to explore it, to examine it, to participate with it, to practice with it. It is also important to hold oneself harmless and blameless, and the universe too, if that outcome does not come about yet, or in that moment, for here we are speaking of practice and an apprenticeship. More could be said about this gesture. The use of the word benevolent is a magical word as well, with origins elsewhere. The use of the word malevolent, and benevolent have magical properties, and when attached or used in certain ways, have, yes, outcomes of their own. So one must understand how to make a request of what and to whom, and how to be a partner, a particle, part of that request. It is not as simple as to attach hope and faith and trust, or even the abilities of co-creativeness or intent to this. You see, there are many, many interesting subjects and studies coming about now, long hidden from other traditions, and they belong now to the layman, for this is now, this last part of this great age, belongs to the layman. And to all of the principles that were long hidden, they are being revealed now. But the revealing of principles or histories, the remembrances of memories, or books of learning, or private collections, or incantations or alchemies, the release of these into the wild, for instance, does not tame them, does not make them useful. And though the time belonged to the layman must yet find within himself the great truths, how to study them, how to hold careful aim of the arrow before one is able to hit the target. There again we will speak upon this subject. Perhaps we will touch upon it in other times and in other ways. In the now moment we will consider this subject well explored at the very least. At least I have hope and faith that we have. Until the next time, sweet ones, I bid you good day.